Just complete shit chatting.
Yeah, so like wedding stuff, our budget is like 20,000, but I don't
Okay.
think we'll spend that. I feel like a lot of people book a venue where you have to like get all the stuff yourself,
Mm, mm.
set everything up. So we booked a restaurant, like a fancy restaurant, and so they have all the chairs and tables and cutlery and flowers and all that. And then it's just like we have a minimum spend at the restaurant. So then the only other expenses we have are, well, only other expenses that are big expenses are like photography, which we booked, an officiant, and then like dress and suit.
Yeah, going relatively like not simple, but like nothing too crazy, I imagine.
Yeah, well, like I've been to a lot of weddings, and so my best friend's wedding, he had the reception, he had the wedding at like 11 a.m. on
Right.
a farm, and then the reception was at a golf course later at 5 p.m. So they had to book two places, and
Oh,
like he booked limos to go between the places for the
yeah, I
wedding
was gonna
party.
say.
It's like a whole day affair, which is like, in my opinion, like quite a headache for guests as well to
Yeah,
block off
that's a
a whole
lot.
day. So ours is like our wedding starts at 5. The ceremony will be there. We'll have an hour break where we can go take pictures in like downtown Vancouver's like old school town, like part. So it's like basically like a lot of brick everywhere, like central London-esque.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then we come back and have a dinner at like 6:30 or 7. So like everyone's already there. No one goes anywhere.
Nice.
So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. It seemed like it was going to be a big headache, and we're like, oh, we're kind of like
We're
we
done.
sent out save the dates this week, and we started planning the wedding 3 weeks ago.
So like everything, just very efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't want like I can't imagine the people who like have. Well, we don't have a lot of people. There'll probably be like 50 people there.
Yeah, that's a sound number. It's nothing too crazy. Yeah.
I have no family members except my mom and my
Right.
dad.
Right.
None. And then Mads has a big family, but we've been living not there for so long that we might not invite everyone.
Right. Fair.
So it's a small wedding, but still, like I feel like I feel like most weddings are like 100 people.
I
But
think when we did it, it was like, yeah, we had 80 max, and even then, I'm like, nah, we don't even need that many people.
yeah, and like this restaurant could seat 80 or 100.
Hmm.
It's just a long table. There are two long tables, so we could, and we just basically just pay for a fancy dinner for everyone. That's all.
Yeah,
So I mean,
that's definitely the way to do it. That's like far less fucking headache,
so
especially especially considering you're traveling halfway across the world for it, and half your guests are doing that as well.
yeah, so very very minimal headache. We told everyone who's not there, like you can come if you want. Obviously, we want you there, but also don't really have time to like hang out with you. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. But
Excellent. What time are you on at the moment? You're like what, 8 hours ahead of me? Is that right?
should be 6 or 7. It's 4:40
Okay. All right.
in the
It's
day
not too bad.
or in the
That's not
afternoon.
too bad.
So
Yeah, that's all right.
almost done the work. So that's nice.
Okay. Excellent. So this is I don't know if you had an idea from a structure perspective of what to talk about here. I was just like, let's just chat shit like we usually do when it comes to recent topics, things we've seen, clients, whatever it is.
I feel like recent topics is a good one. I always
Ooh.
it's hard. I'm quite straight to the point on Instagram, but every time I
Mm.
get on a podcast, everyone's like, "Oh, you're quite like diplomatic of like you see both sides and you kind of never like take aggressive points of view." But then when I do Q&As on my story, I'm just like quite aggressive of like you just probably suck at this. So I think
Instagram
a
is
podcast
Instagram
is
is
a
not the
better.
place for that. yeah, Instagram is not the place to have like loads of nuance though. It's just I've tried it and it's not worth. This is why I like doing shit like this because you can just have that very wide open discussion. I'd be like,
Yeah.
let's just consider everything. Whereas Instagram, like I'm the same. Like you need to work on this. Please go do that, and then come back to me.
Yeah. Like I'll get so many like, I have this pain here. How do I fix it? I was like, you just need one assessment with me. That's it. Just pay
Yeah,
money.
literally.
And
Yeah, pay money.
I'll help. Like I can't do it over question box. I mean, I
Yeah,
can, but it takes a long time, and then I would have to go back and forth to do a bunch. So
yeah. No physio wants to do a subjective history over Instagram DMs. It's just not viable. It's just the worst way
yeah.
to do it.
So like I get like some people send me pages upon pages of things, and I'm like, hey man, I just literally send them my link tree or my Calendly link. That's
Mhm.
it. I don't say anything else.
Yeah.
So in new topics,
Hmm.
what do we got?
Oh, I don't know. The one I kicked off yesterday about was it walking lunges being a D tier exercise. I don't know if you saw that. That was um that was from the evidence-based or science-based crowd, whatever you want to call it. And
A
I'm just
D
sat there
tier
like,
exercise for
yeah,
hypertrophy.
obviously, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, through the hypertrophy lens, because so many people are terrible at moving, I would say it's for most people, it's a D tier exercise,
Yeah.
right? I would also say it's an S tier exercise for
Everything else.
just, it's almost like the ultimate litmus test of lower body function,
Mhm.
right? If you can take 50-kilo dumbbells and do walking lunges and not be all over the place, we're in a very good place.
Yeah, we haven't got a lot to work on.
Yeah. So I think because everyone is, it's cool, this new like hypertrophy thing where everyone thinks stable exercises are better for hypertrophy, but when they are,
Hmm.
and we see everything, or some see everything in like from one dimension,
Hmm. Hmm.
when if you just do stable exercises. Do you know who just does stable exercises? Everyone who pays my bills when they do physio consults.
Literally. It's my favorite thing is like the concept of like, oh, this hurts, or I'm not very good at it. I'm going to make myself more stable. And then they, as a byproduct, become worse at doing those things because they're just used to being as stable as possible. And you have this incredible self-fulfilling prophecy of like reducing function and like definitely building muscle, but like you are kind of making yourself worse because you're not willing to just do an additional thing.
Yeah. And I think the we don't we when we look through just one thing, it will work short term.
Oh
But
yeah, of
when we
course.
look at, do you want to, how much hypertrophy are you getting in the next 3 months
Hmm.
relative to the next 5 years? That's
Yeah.
what people miss the boat on. When I'm like, you need to do dips. And they're like, can I do dip machine? It's more stable. I was like, no. Like if you can do your body weight on the chain, we're in a good place.
Yeah. It's
And
it is that kind of like that long-term process thinking because I don't know, and you probably have this with clients where they're like you have this conversations, they're like, oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing where I am in 12 to 24 months. Like, those are the clients who are like they have like the mindset right. Whereas the ones who are like, oh yeah, like how much muscle can we build in 3 months? And I'm like, probably not that much unless like we're doing some really crazy shit. And especially like I said, if you haven't got the ability to do these exercises, then like it's probably not the thing we need to obsess about over the next 3 months.
yeah, I think the how much muscle can I build is such a funny conversation when we break it down from a switching gears from a nutrition
Yeah, go on.
perspective.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So imagine how much muscle. Okay, you come to me, you're like, I want to gain. How much muscle you want to gain in a year?
Let's say I
10,
want to gain like yeah, that's 10. Let's say 10.
10 kilos.
Yeah, so let's do
Okay,
it. Fuck it. 10 kilos.
you want to gain 10,000 grams in a year. I'm going to calculate this so it's actually accurate. You want to gain 10,000 grams in a year of muscle tissue, not
Muscle.
scale,
Pure
not
muscle.
not
Pure
scale
muscle.
weight, which
Yeah.
means there will be water as well.
Mhm.
Assuming, well, let's assuming you gain zero fat. You will. gain 27 grams per day. So there's 27 grams of amino acids that is being stored
Yeah.
per day
Daily. Consistently
daily.
as well.
So if we say muscles maybe a quarter or like
Yeah,
one
that's
eighth,
yeah, something
right?
like that.
So
Yeah.
maybe you're storing 200 grams per week of amino acids,
Hmm.
right? And maybe that's if we do everything right, you're maybe well, that's 10 kilos of muscle. You're like a kilo a week of scale weight,
Yeah.
which is a ridiculous amount.
Like 4 kilos a month.
Yeah. Like, yeah, like I have a guy who he's from the UK actually, and
Mhm.
he's gained 4 kilos in 5 months.
And I assume body
Like
composition's at a pretty good point, at a good
body
rate as well.
composition is better.
Better,
He
better.
was
Yeah, that's a
he was
great position.
tactics off, and now it's better. And he was like, "Oh, like I'm gaining weight like quite slowly." And I was like, even 5 kilos in a year is like a lot.
Mhm.
So it's like you're gaining 100 grams per week. If you're gaining 1,000 grams per week on the scale, what do you think that is? And he's like, I never thought of it that way. And I'm like, yeah, like, we don't need. I really don't like the narrative of like we can gain muscle whenever. It's true, don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, like deficit surplus maintenance, but you need a surplus, but you need a surplus at certain times, in my opinion. Because a surplus and a deficit is not an absolute thing. If we look at it from a
Yeah,
system,
it's one of those things. I think the industry is very good at looking to like black and white with a lot of these things and forgetting that there's a lot of like gray involved. And again, I think it circles back to Instagram being it's quite hard to have those like open conversations on Instagram because you can say, oh yeah, there's all these things to think about, but it's very hard to do that on a platform which is designed for very quick media consumption. And I think we circle back to that concept of like current trends and people say this is the best exercise for muscle building, and it's like yeah, but like in a vacuum, in what scenario, and then over how long of a period of time are we talking here?
yeah, I think that's the thing, the period of time, because the period of time is when you watch someone's reel, are they right or wrong? Whoever can be
Yeah.
the most right wins Instagram, but that's not
Mhm.
how you win coaching. How you win coaching is getting long-term results with clients.
Mhm.
So we don't see that of like people want to be right more than they want to get clients results, I think. Because the instant
Yeah.
gratification is like, I know the best exercise. I know the tricep does this, and you guys don't. So I'm a better coach. It's like, okay, cool. Like it's important, don't get me wrong. But it's
Mhm.
like, how do you apply it long term?
I think every coach goes through that like phase, no matter how long it is, where you kind of be like, oh, I'm going to post the stuff that's like absolutely correct, and then you spend more time with actual people, and you go, wow, this really does not matter as much as I made it out to. And what's more important is actually, like you said, spending actual time with people and going through that process of refining training, refining nutrition over and over until you find that position where it's like, fuck, I'm bigger and leaner in a very short, respectively period of time.
I think it's hard because we need to look at who the audience is. So like our
Yeah.
audience is very much so like when I learn something cool, I'm like, oh, I want to share this with my
Mm-hmm.
audience because my audience like cares about the nuance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was looking into the other day how like the big trend is like muscle damage
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how muscle damage will impair glycogen storage. So,
Right.
so think about you're prepping someone for a show or a photo
Mm-hmm.
shoot. What do? You get them to do? You get them to do a bunch of reps that don't do anything, not close to failure, to pump
Mm-hmm.
blood into the muscle, which is causing fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
in which now the muscle is damaged to the extent that it can't store as much glycogen. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. This is literally the opposite of what everyone
Opposite.
does.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
I actually had a guy this week doing a photo shoot, and I was like, do one set of 5 to 10 on these exercises
Hmm.
2 days before your shoot. And then he was like, okay, this is very different. And I was like, yeah, don't worry. And I obviously, like, we can't tell photo shoot to photo shoot. This guy does photo shoots all the time,
Hmm.
but he was like, oh, it looks sick. I'm like, all right, cool. And I gave him more food, and he woke on the first day of loading, and he woke up flatter the next day.
Right. Okay.
Or sorry, he woke up like he was able to store, like he didn't spill over
Hmm.
when I thought he would have spilled. Because usually I'm like, okay, we spill the first day, and then the second day you kind of like give them less, and then if you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
spill a little on the last day, you just give them no food till the photo shoot.
Hmm.
But with him, I gave him food that I thought he would spill, and then he didn't, and then I had to give him more food because training volume was lower. And I
Yeah, that
think
makes
less
sense.
muscle damage equals more ability to store glycogen, which is super, super interesting.
Yeah, I never, it's not really something I've spent much time on, I have to admit.
See, I think all the muscle damage, like calcium ion trend in hypertrophy, is so much more useful for rehab. It's absolutely wild.
I was going to say, yeah, it has way more application, especially when it comes to like things like tissue healing and everything like that.
Yeah. So it's like in like inflammation and stuff like that, of like if you understand muscle physiology, sure, you can make someone bigger,
Hmm.
but like everything's kind of gonna work. Everyone's looking for the 1% there. But I would say the rehab industry misses the boat way
Mm.
farther. Like the yeah.
Yeah, I think and I think it might have even been you that said this is the concept of like getting someone big versus getting someone progressively big without hurting them. And they're very, very different things. Because like I'm sure you've probably seen it more than I have, is how many like big guys get to a point where it's like I am so hurt, I cannot train the way I used to. And as a result, I cannot get as big as I want. Whereas like you get individuals who are able to like progressively just continue training over longer periods of time because they are just not getting injured, or they're a lot better at managing those inevitable smaller injuries so they don't become larger issues. And it's like I think that's, in my opinion, that's always been more valuable as a coach, especially when working with guys like bodybuilders, like powerlifters, especially. It's like you want to make sure that you turn up to your meet or your show and you can move into your poses and not feel stiff as fuck or not feel like your shoulders are jacked up or something like that. That's more valuable to me than just be like, how much muscle can I pack on this individual as quickly as possible and like absolutely bury them for one show versus the fact that they want to compete for the next 5 to 10 years.
Especially because in powerlifting and bodybuilding relative to like true athletics, we choose everything. We choose
Mm-hmm.
the training and the competition is chose for us.
Mm-hmm.
So every single thing that we do that is active, we choose ourselves.
Yeah, you've got more
There,
control of variability.
there,
Yeah.
there's zero variables. We
Yeah.
should never fuck up, right? When you're training real athletes, it's like, oh, buddy plays basketball. He had to play 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, shoot. Like, oh, we played triple overtime game. So now training has to change.
Mm-hmm.
With bodybuilding, powerlifting is so easy because you control everything. So like you should be able to, once you gain the function, just don't work
Don't
out like
lose
an
it.
idiot, and you can do it forever. Like I think Kuba is the best example of this.
Yeah.
So obviously, normal bro meathead lifts a bunch of heavy weights his whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I like before I met him, and as I was like meeting him, he went into more of like the I want to be dialed in on everything. Now his training, he doesn't basically trains pain free forever, makes crazy results because his training is just good. It's just good
Mm-hmm.
programming, good execution, and you need to do no like maintenance work, no
Yeah.
niggles, no anything because his training is just good. And I feel like everyone could. It's so simple. Like my physio consult for lifters are just me lifting, looking at their lifts and be like, you just trash at everything, pretty much.
It's funny you say that because that's the biggest thing I've started to lead towards discussing on my end with like either content or just like within clients is how much like if you just have like half decent programming, like the rehab industry is so not hyper focused, but I find it's very focused on like, oh, try this exercise for this issue or try this hack for this problem. And like it can have like transient positive interventions. But like I find like if you just refine your training and like get good at refining your programming over and over and over, you have far less need for those hacks and those movements. Especially if you spend like you overhaul your training, you spend like one phase on like movement optimization, for example, and then your next phase, like right, we've really like dialed in all the things that you were shit at. This next phase, let's start sending it a bit more. And like you really just need that one phase. For some people, they do just need that kind of like small period of time where they just work on those deficits, and then they can just go back to doing not what they were doing before, but the outline of what they were doing before, but better. I don't know if you had that experience.
Yeah, I think the hacks are important for
Mm-hmm.
gaining trust with someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I usually like I'm sure you get this too. Like I went to so many physios and no one could help me, and then they wind up in our DMs. And
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons like psychologically that I get good results with people is I come in just over the top confident and I come in telling them exactly what's going to happen. I was like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
we do like, I don't know, he had knee pain and we like shift the tibia into internal rotation with the foam roll. And I'm like, okay, you're going to do this and this. You're going to put pressure here. You're going to do this. And then your knee is going to feel better. And as soon as I literally tell them that and they do it and they feel it and they're like, oh my God, this guy's a genius. And then everything I say, regardless of it's like good or bad, it will work better.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I tell every clinician that I'm in contact with of like, I don't care if you know nothing. Don't
Mm-hmm.
let your like, don't let your patient or slash client know that you are unsure about anything. There's nothing worse than it's like, oh, I have pain here. And they're like, oh, we're gonna do this test and then we'll see. And then maybe you have a week this, so we'll try this and see how it feels. It's like you were the most unsure person of all time. But now the client's unsure and they're going to get worse results no matter what.
Yeah, I do find that's probably the biggest fallacy within MSK physio, especially is this. And like, I don't know if you found this, but like, one issue I've seen a lot is like diagnoses, tests, like they change quite frequently. And like, if you're someone with that issue and you don't have a clinician or a therapist who's able to identify those problems, that's how you get like stuck on that like kind of physio hamster wheel where like I've seen four physios, they've all said different things or they've all said the same thing, but none of them know how to help me. And then they end up in talking to one of us and we go, yeah, just do these two exercises and you'll probably notice a difference like pretty much immediately. And they're like, holy fuck, why has that happened? And I'm like, it's just because we're seeing it through a different lens or we've been taught it a different way or we're able to observe it through a very different way than the standard therapist.
I honestly think physios, if you look at the definition of diagnosis, I'm pretty sure just it's just a name for a group of symptoms.
It's a lot of diagnoses I've found have become more like umbrella terms than actual diagnoses, like shoulder related rotator cuff related shoulder pain or subacromial pain syndrome. It's just like it doesn't mean anything.
Because humans just like, well, I haven't given it, I don't think any physio should give a diagnosis ever.
I
Because
know what you mean.
what does the patient do? Google's a diagnosis. Then they see a
Hmm.
bunch of shit and they get freaked out. Right?
I,
Everyone wants to know what's wrong. I tell
mm,
people, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Everything I do is a guess. Do you know who
mm,
makes a diagnosis? Not a doctor, a
mm.
radiologist,
Wait, I was going to say.
a guy who reads a scan.
Mm,
And the scan it's a diagnosis of the structure. It's not a diagnosis of the issue.
mhm.
Right? I worked with a guy who had two surgeries and he got better slowly, but I don't think he needed the surgery. I just think he got diagnosed from his structure and the structure wasn't actually causing the symptoms.
And the
I see it
surgery was the theoretical intervention. Yeah. Yeah.
all the time. Like someone will book in with me, they'd be like, "Oh, I just got a injection in my shoulder." I was like, "Cool, postpone your thing for 3 weeks until it kind of wears off, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, if I give you lidocaine and then I punch you in the face, lidocaine is what you get at the dentist to numb your mouth, if anyone
Yeah, yeah,
listening
yeah,
to
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Then you won't feel the pain, but when it wears off, you will. So I'm just going in blind. We have no idea if what we're doing works if we can't, we're just numbing the symptoms. Quick sidebar. I had a girl who I worked with for a couple months.
Mhm.
She got a lidocaine injection into her SI joint, which
What?
I had never heard about before either.
That cannot be a thing.
Like think about how long it like when you go to the dentist, how long does it take for
Oh,
your mouth to get less numb?
fucking in the
Like
SI
half a
joint
day.
as well. Yeah,
Half a day.
something like that. Yeah, 12 hours. Yeah, let's say, yeah.
How transient is like how transient is that going to be? How do we think this is a good idea at all? Um, yeah, so not diagnosis literally means nothing. The
Yeah.
question that I want to throw on my phone, every single person. It's not my fault. It's not their fault. What do you think
Yeah.
it is? I think,
Mm.
what do you mean? Told me what it is. Shoulder pain. I think it's shoulder pain. I'm gonna make your shoulder pain better. They're like, do you think it's my rotator cuff? I was like, is your rotator cuff part of your shoulder? Probably. Probably everything. And
Mm.
they're like, just get very confused. And I like kind of explain like the diagnosis doesn't matter. It's just a guess. Everything I do is a guess. Nutrition, even training, coaching, all of it is a guess until it
Mm.
happens. Right? Hey, eat these calories, you're gonna lose weight. It's a guess. You have no idea.
Yeah, you don't know if you're
Sometimes,
going to lose weight, then you refine it. Yeah.
sometimes you're wrong,
Yeah.
right? Especially hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the biggest guess on earth. It's like, oh, here's your 10 sets a week. You're gonna grow. You're gonna grow optimally. But like, I know people who do 20 sets a week till failure, and they don't take drugs and they grow. And I'm like, genetics, welcome.
I
Like,
think
it's not.
that's a really interesting point because like it kind of circles back to what we spoke about speaking in absolutes on social media. Is people say things like they're so sure it's going to happen, and like it's almost like you're just afraid to admit that like it could happen, but there's just an equal chance that for some people under XYZ circumstance, it is not going to happen. And like if you look at how social media does, it's like this is the two exercises to blow your biceps up according to science, and it's like cool. You give that to someone who trains with fuck all intensity, has got no ability to control their shoulder through like maximal extension, doesn't eat very well, like or doesn't train very frequently, then well, it's just not the case. Like it's objectively not the case, but you're presenting it as objective.
With hypertrophy, I think it's really funny because people don't understand that your your levers will change, moment
Mm-hmm.
arms, external and internal, which will just make some people bad at training some body parts.
Mm-hmm.
Very bad. Which means regardless, they're going to grow slower or very little. So it's like this is the best exercise. It's like, yeah, sorry, you're just not made to do. If you're
Mm-hmm.
white, sorry, you're just not made to do lats very well. You're not. It's the truth. You're doing why? Because your shoulder girdle and your pelvis are the same, and the leverages just don't work as well as some other people. If you have a men's physique bod, your shoulder girdle is wider than your hips, and you're going to have an easier time adducting your humerus, and you're going to build a better V taper, and it's just your structure. Sorry.
Yeah. Like you
So
physically, I think genetics are so downplayed when it comes to like potential. And like it is just not discussed as much. And like I'm sure you probably had it where you get, and I speak to loads of the coaches about this, is where you have one client where like you go, oh, we'll just change one or two things, and they'll either blow up or they'll get so lean and like look insane. And then you get other clients where you have to like spend like time like refining it and like really pushing them, either like dieting them hard or really pushing volume or food up for them to get even a similar response. And it's just like so for some people that's it is what it is. Like you can't physically change that.
yeah, like it's some people like it surprises me. I'm like, are you sure you're adhering to this plan? Are you sure you're doing
Uh,
this? Are you sure you're eating all the food? Like I had this hybrid girl. She ran like marathons.
mhm,
And I think we only worked together for 12 weeks.
mhm,
But when we started, she was doing RDLs with 60 kilos. Or
mhm,
sorry, 30 kilo or 20 kilos per hand. and she was eating like 1,500 calories or whatever.
Right. Okay.
By the end of us working together for in 3 months, she was eating like 700 carb on her high day, and she was doing RDLs with 60 kilos per hand. She weighs
Hmm.
60 kilos
Hmm.
and was like hitting running PRs. I'm just like, are you sure you're eating all this food? Because you look leaner every week. Like you're performing. Are you sure? Like, send me videos of your training. Training perfect.
Hmm.
Everything perfect. I was like, you are just a genetic freak. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Which is it's great to watch that unfold, but you feel like, God, my job is maybe not as good as I thought it was because I'm just basically just feeding an absolute freak just to get them to do more. And like I feel like anything I give them might work in this case. But again, even then, you do have to know how people are going to respond to interventions. Because even then, like it's say you do have a genetic freak, like you've got okay, well, there's still things that you can do subpar. That means they won't reach that potential, but you're still in your power to help them reach that insane potential that they have with that knowledge. And I think this is something that coaches kind of forget. Like it's very easy to kind of pigeonhole yourself into a position where like, oh, they're a hard gainer, and it's like, are they a hard gainer, or have they just have someone never really been able to show them exactly what you can do or what you need to do in a gaining phase to actually achieve this? Like it's and it comes back to that concept of diagnosis. People have to label themselves. People love to say shit like that. It's like I don't know, you probably would have been in the industry around time where like the mesomorph ectomorph thing was like such a big thing, and people were trying to figure out which one they were. And it's just like, really?
I mean, I still think that's kind of a thing. Like
You
you
reckon?
can
Yeah.
genetically group people into a thing, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm the middle mesomorph, like
Hmm.
very
Yeah,
hard. Like
I would say
same
that.
with you.
Yeah.
You can put on muscle pretty well. If you fuck off your diet, you get fat really fast. But if you're dialed in, you get lean really fast,
Absolutely.
right? Like there is groups, but it's like does the diagnosis of that matter? The biggest one
Hmm.
that makes me like I always every question mark I get the same question. It's like, how do you assess someone's infrasternal angle over online? I was
I
like,
have
I don't.
seen, yes, yes.
I don't. It's like whether you're a wide or a narrow, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to look at how you function.
Hmm.
There is some
Hmm.
people who like do the ISA thing, and their entire model is based on like if you're a wide, you have these layers of compensation in this order, which is fine. But my
Hmm.
entire model is not based on that
Hmm.
because my entire model is getting people to not do physio things as fast as possible so they can get jacked and strong. That's my model.
Hmm.
So it's like, am I wide or a narrow? And like most people, this is a backs thing. I think a wide is actually an evolutionary progression
Hmm.
from a narrow. Like think about
Okay.
go to Africa, how many wides are there? None. Zero. Like where did humans come from? There.
Yeah.
That the lazier humans got that we evolved into wide ISAs.
Hmm.
I
That's an
physically
interesting take. Interesting.
think about hey, you take everyone's ISA on the earth.
Hmm.
Guarantee you there's 80% narrows,
Hmm. Yeah, majority. Yeah.
20% wides.
Hmm.
And the people who think they're wide, they're just fat. It's like you're not, your infrasternal angle is not wide. You are just wide as a human.
It's like, yeah, it's just we can't actually see it. We can't actually feel it.
There's like hit a vacuum. Like you're if you can. There is like I find it interesting in bodybuilding of like when someone takes drugs and gets massive, their rib cage will change shape to the point where like they will become a wide, which is like
Mhm.
obviously a better look for bodybuilding in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
like if you're gonna pull a like I can't really pull a vacuum, but when I pull a vacuum, it looks shit anyways because my infrasternal angle is like a fucking tent. It's like 30 degrees.
Yeah,
Uh
mine's similar. Mine is not big at all.
yeah. But like narrow infrasternal angle, you know what looks good? Your abs are more blocky,
Hmm.
which means like when you flex your abs and get lean, it looks nice.
It looks great. Yeah. You could probably
right?
get
So
away with flexing your abs not being as lean as well. Like,
yeah,
kind of look all right with it. Yeah.
yeah. So that's like the wide and narrow thing is the biggest like label that people put on themselves in like as soon as they find out about it, especially like obviously coach. It's very trendy to learn about biomechanics and then start a mentorship. I
Hmm.
mean, you also do that, do not like some sort of thing. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who I would say are unqualified who start a mentorship and put out content. I'm like, you're just very much missing the boat on this
I think
because like you
the
haven't had the experience yet.
I think the way I kind of rationalize it is like, and you've used the term lens like pretty appropriately, is like people like they like to hyperfixate on one thing, and it's like you just it's I think it's good to be aware of these things, and like every coach has got their own model, every coach has got their own way of doing things, regardless if you want to call it a model or a framework, whatever the fuck it is, everyone has their own way of doing shit, and you learn that as you go along, and I think the thing that and when I do like the courses or workshops I do, I just the main way I teach it is I go like, here are the main lenses that people use. This is what they mean. This is why they use it, and this is what they use to infer from like a intervention perspective. Whether or not it's good or bad, or whether or not it's relevant, is very subjective to your ability to apply it, which I think is the biggest thing. Because if you know something and can't apply it, then what is the fucking point? And then the other thing that's the other variable is the client in front of you. It's like, is this something that is relevant to use with that individual in front of you? Um, and that's the thing I will always come back to. And like, regardless of which one you prefer to bias yourself towards, you have to be aware of that bias because otherwise you kind of like pigeonhole yourself into this like, right, I'm going to be the guy who always looks at being persona language for my clients, and it's like you might not even need to, that might not even need to be the thing that's relevant to that person, or like you might not need to assess everyone's gait, you might not need to assess like go through the compression expansion model with every single client, but having an awareness of what those mean and what those interventions could be applicable for, I do think that is relevant, but I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think those all the models, any correct model is based on principles that no one can argue,
Mhm.
right? So like the compression expansion model is based on like fluid dynamics,
Mhm. Absolutely.
which you can't argue, right? It like any model, any good fat loss model is based on the laws of thermodynamics, in which you
Mhm.
can't argue. So it's like either A, we have these things that are like very, very universal. Like you can't argue gravity,
Mhm.
you can't argue muscle contraction, but either A, people don't apply the principles in the right way, and then their model is flawed,
Mhm.
or they don't know the facts about the principles, and then they're building a model on flawed principles, which is most people because they don't learn all the principles enough to have a working model. Most clinicians it's anatomy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just think that you haven't even looked at a picture of a joint because you still think it's like a door hinge
Yeah, it's like
because
the
the text
Vitruvian man, and then that's all that
it's a door.
exists. Yeah, yeah,
It's
literally.
not their fault because like who's going to teach them that unless they have a brain and can think for themselves. And especially that this is the conversation I get to when I help someone. They say, "Why aren't the other physios? Why don't the other physios know this?" And it's not their fault. When I started physio school, I was very salty. I spent a lot of money to fly across the world, long distance with my fresh fiance for 9 months to get taught get taught a model that doesn't help anyone, which is fine. But I was very salty at the start. But it's not the physio school's fault. It's not the textbook's fault because real life will never be textbook and research. And things aren't based on principles, they're based on research. And if I'm the normal physio, most people, what happens? If you're from North America, you go to elementary school, you go to high school, you go to university, in which you either take out a massive loan or your parents pay for it, and then you go to post secondary or
Yeah,
postgraduate. You go to physio school,
yeah,
and you've never. ask anyone any questions in your entire life. You have no life experience and you take everything at face value. And then you're from Canada, but you want to go to London. So you spend $250,000 to go to school. And then why would I question anything? I'm spending
Mhm.
all of this money and time.
To be
And then
taught, yeah.
you get out of physio school and you have this complex of like, I know everything. It's like, actually, no, you have a piece of paper. That is all. And then so it's not someone's fault. Like, why would I listen to everyone else? Right? If I paid you $250,000 for training, I would expect you to have all the answers.
Did your like masters like change the way you approached like clients with injuries? Like after you got like the physio degree itself? Because I know we've had conversations about like how like not the degree doesn't change anything, but like how going from PT with rehab knowledge to physio with the same rehab knowledge is not that much of a jump.
I think the time that I spent in physio school changed, but it wasn't the physio school. Physio school just solidified things that the physio school content
Mhm.
solidified things that I already knew didn't make sense, and they just taught it the same way. But then it brought to light the fact that that things don't make sense in my head, and I needed to go find answers. So it was different for me because I went to school during COVID. So I
Right.
moved to
Okay.
London during COVID, and it was lockdown.
Mhm.
So I actually had online classes. So I
Right.
was like, why do I even need to be here? I actually flew home for a little bit because I'm like, I'm doing online classes. I'll just wake up in the middle of the night. Who cares? And then they were recorded, and I was like, I don't even go to class at all. Like, I don't need to. Like, sweet. And then, but it basically was like they would explain a concept or a problem. We'd have a problem, and they'd explain it in a way that doesn't make sense, which is the way that most physios are taught. And then I'd be like, this doesn't make sense. I need to find the actual way in case I need to help someone with this problem. So physio school was definitely the catalyst of my learning, my self-learning, because they gave me a part answer to solve a problem. And I had unlimited time because it was COVID. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't do anything. I could go to the shops, if you will. That's what the London people say. Could walk to
Yeah,
the
I know.
shops. And then that's it. And then I just sat on my computer and just researched how to actually help people and
Mhm.
filled in all the gaps. And then I just had no gaps when I went back to class. And then I would say some things and people wouldn't like me. Some people would. And then that's how so I don't think physio school at the actual school changed, but my time at physio school obviously changed it shaped how I view everything. And then I slowly made a model when they're like, when you're a physio, you're gonna have to solve this problem, and we solve it in this way. I'm like, okay, that kind of sounds like it'll work, but I have experience that I don't think that'll work completely. How do I make it work completely? But
I
that's
think I
kind
think
of
that's a yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how my experience went. You're just finishing up, correct?
Yeah, finishing in a couple months, thankfully. But
How is did things change? Were you very underwhelmed with physio school?
yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how because obviously yours mine is an undergrad, so the first entire year was essentially like basics of anatomy and function. Like this is a quad, this is where the quads are, this is what the quads do. So like that was a fucking breeze. So it was predominantly MSK and a little bit of physiology. Second year they crammed spinal, respiratory, neurology into 12 weeks. And then the entirety of 2024 was basically placements for me. So like that's been all your practical stuff. So that's 1,000 hours. And like the last two modules are research and then complex patients, which I think are actually quite applicable from like that kind of wider scope because they are basically forcing you to ask the similar questions that you were going through, which is, oh, I've been taught this over 3 years, but I've just been on placement for 1,000 hours, and I've realized the stuff they taught me actually isn't always very applicable, and I now need to be an autonomous human and figure out what the hell to do with this individual in front of me that hasn't just got knee pain but has all these other issues as well. So I think that was very helpful. I came into the degree pretty arrogant about MSK, and I would like to think I'm a little bit less arrogant now, or maybe arrogant in a different way. And at the time, my coaching practice framework was a little bit more juvenile than what it is now. where it was very much like I was kind of stuck in like one model essentially. I didn't have that kind of broader lens. And within the first couple of months of being within uni, not because of uni, but because of the other education I was doing, I was stepping back and going, actually, there's a lot more things I need to consider when it comes to rehab and coaching. So it matched well with the fact that I was in a degree where you have to have those conversations. Like you said, you have to like meet those people with like not complex conditions, but like more than just the diagnosis. So it has helped. But like yourself, it's just the time and the fact we like for me, it's always like I'm terrible with someone else dictating my time. Like it's just like being on placement, doing 9 to 5, as much of a learning experience it was for me. It was just like I hated the concept of being like I have to be here from 9 to 5. There were so many like formalities and like wasting time. I was like, I could be doing this instead. I could be doing this instead. I think that was where I found my frustration. I don't know if you found the same. And I imagine in COVID, it might have been a bit of a different circumstance.
Yeah, I think COVID was it was still like it was kind of like end of COVID by the time I did
Mm-hmm.
placements. So our
Mm-hmm.
degrees are quite similar. So like
Mm-hmm.
our first year is like basically the undergrad first year. It's the
Yeah,
same.
makes sense.
Like I had taught biomechanics at college at that point. So I'm like, oh, anatomy, sick. And I was like, where is the real physio? Because in Canada, it's like a real master's program right away. It's like
Yeah.
there's no and there's like anatomy, but it's like I don't think there is even anatomy. It's like advanced anatomy, and they breeze through it because they expect you to have an undergrad in kin. Like you have to have an
Mm-hmm.
undergrad in kin or like
Mm-hmm.
some medical. But in the UK, like there was a girl in my program who had an undergrad in psychology, and she was like just absolutely like she worked her bag off. Don't get me wrong, she was just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely lost from day
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yeah,
Like
I
she
know what you
had
mean.
no experience with any of it. She's like origin and insertion of muscle. This is so hard,
Mm-hmm.
but like for us, I mean,
It's easy.
it
Yeah.
was 10 years of me doing that before I went to physio school. So it's like, yeah, I think it was very like my program was very similar to yours, even though
Mm-hmm.
mine was a master's. But the placement side, it was interesting. It's very much so like you get some educators are like, this is how we do it. You know nothing. And then there's some educators where like, oh, like the book says this, but like maybe we can do it better. And I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Like you're my kind of people.
You're cool. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's like you see some very interesting things, especially like working on a like in an actual hospital
Mm-hmm.
of like
Absolutely.
reading bloods and stuff like that, and then like being in the quote unquote fitness slash bodybuilding industry. It's like when I was in a hospital, we didn't pay attention to that at all because it's not going to kill someone.
Yeah.
And how people freak out about it when this blood marker is high, like this is very weird. So like learning everything from a medical perspective first, and then going into like a place where people use medical things to enhance performance. I was like, wow, none of this makes sense. So that was the coolest part about placement of like you like in the hospital, this wouldn't fly. So why is it flying out here?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is. I think it is interesting. I think it is as much as we do bitch a little bit about the standard physiotherapy. I do think those experiences like they are helpful. But
Yeah.
I think physio is a bit. I find physio to be a bit of a minefield of a degree because obviously it's so varied. Like there's so many things. You could be a physiotherapist and you could do two completely opposite jobs, like your entire life, like completely different career streams. Um, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because I always felt that like physio MSK should always be its own degree, where it's like you go down the route of talking about like the models and the things that we talk about, the things that we preach, and then like physio, respiratory, neuro, those things should be like their own thing with the foundational MSK still there, but maybe they don't go in as deep of a depth because maybe that MSK interventions aren't as warranted. I don't know if you had that kind of same thought process or if you think it is fine as it is.
I think in a hospital, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in North America, there are very few physios that work in a hospital. Very
Right.
few. Most of the stuff a physio does, a nurse does. So if you're in
Interesting.
Canada, you're an MSK physio. Everyone is.
Hmm.
Everyone works
Right.
private. Everyone's MSK. Everyone just has half-hour sessions and bills through insurance and just they're on an
Mm-hmm.
assembly like an assembly line of patients
True.
But I think like if you want to be truly good at MSK, like the way it's taught is extremely flawed
Hmm.
because it talks about the systems like they're independent
Hmm.
when it's the opposite of that. So it's like, hey, like this is we have an MSK diagnosis, but we have a neurological problem, right? So it's like understanding how these systems work together is the missing part of the physio education of obviously they put it into separate modules to like make things simple, but they never bring it back together. Like I would say some things and they're like, oh, you're talking about like neuro physio. And I was like, no, I'm talking about how muscles contract, which is neuro and musculoskeletal, because a musculoskeletal system would be nothing without the nervous system. So like that's where I find the disconnect was with the education of like we got taught like a human has multiple layers and these layers
Hmm.
never interact, right? It's like if you're rehabbing a stroke patient, you better know how to create hypertrophy in
Yeah,
someone's
absolutely.
leg or they're not going to walk, right? Like there's no one, like there's no different disciplines. It's all the same. I mean,
Yeah, there's no workaround. Yeah.
in the hospital, they divide them up into wards.
Mm.
So you have to specialize because you're dealing with the same thing all the time. Okay, cool. Right. But it's like, what if someone has an MSK problem and a neurological diagnosis and a cardiac diagnosis? So where do they go? That's where the flaw in the physio education came in. And that's where I think it just makes very one-dimensional. It's like when I'm on MSK placement, I turn off my neuro brain, I turn off my rest brain, I turn off my critical care brain. And then when I'm on neuro placement, I turn off my MSK brain. And it just makes a person who can't think as well as someone who just like, hey, this is how a body works. It doesn't stop working like this. It always works. Your heart always beats. Brain always does brain things. Like you need this much fuel. This is how muscles contract. This is how gravity works. And then once you have that model, it's like things get a lot easier.
Yeah. I think that's a big disconnect is like I find it almost ironic. It's like so a great example of this that I did when I did my respiratory plays, you run into a lot of MSK issues because like you've got someone with like COPD that don't breathe very well. You got to see MSK issues up the chain. And the educator I had was and like this is a standard NHS, like overworked, underpaid, like pretty much everyone there. But it was very much like and she was aware of my MSK enthusiasm background. And if we had a patient who had an MSK issue, she was like, "Oh, you can work on the MSK issue. I'll do the respiratory." And I'm like, "They're the same thing. They're things that we can both create interventions for together right now. There is no I do this, you do this. Like, and this is annoyingly something I think that you on your own should be able to do and integrate into your treatment. But as you said, it is rarely seen that way. It is very much seen like we have the categories, much like the way the university teach modules. It's like, here's your neuro, fuck off your MSK education. We just do neuro here, or like we just do respiratory here, and it's just it doesn't connect to real life patients, like you said.
Yeah. Like I think if they even named it like neurological principles, musculoskeletal principles, it's like these are
Principles,
the
yeah.
principles. And then you just get case like a billion case studies in like your second
Mm,
year. And it's
yeah.
like, okay, this person has this. Which like make a list of which neuro principles apply, which musculoskeletal principles apply, which cardiac principles apply. Just kidding, all of them apply all the time, right? And like that's how you should look at treating a human because it's the most
Mm.
complex system on the earth. And I
It's
think
it's
we
funny you
try
say
to
that. Yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say because our final module at university is with complex patients. We have to pick a case study with a patient with complex issues. So we have people who've got like, all right, I had this individual who had respiratory and neuro, who had respiratory and MSK, or who had neuro and MSK, what the hell it is. And it's quite funny because like from the way the case study is framed, we're very much given autonomy, and it's probably presented as the hardest module because people are like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, but this is what you're going to have to do when you get these complex patients. Like you can't just follow the framework. And as much as it is hard and there are guidelines, especially when you work in the NHS, you also need to have the clinical skills, like you said, to be like, cool, I'm aware of this principle within neurology. I'm also aware that like this MSK issue is very present, or this person has got a respiratory issue because of their neurological issue. And so, and I don't know if you had that very similar education, but but the fact is, it comes very, very late on in the degree, where it's like I do think it should be not the foundation, but it should be layered as it goes through. Be like, cool, we finished our spinal module. Let's talk about someone with a spinal issue and a neurological issue, or spinal and respiratory, and just let's unpack it a little bit and have those. It doesn't need to be assessments, just those conversations. And like I said, those case studies, just like here are 100 case studies. Let's just pick one or two and let's just talk about what we do with that individual.
Yeah, I think that's like what should happen on placement.
Hmm.
You have real individuals and you have like a senior person
Hmm.
that kind of runs the show, but it doesn't because on placement it's just a narrow view again because you
Hmm.
don't get a placement, you get an MSK placement,
Hmm.
you get a neuro placement. Like when I was on MSK, my educator said to me, "I've never thought about the ribs. I didn't think they move."
I remember you saying this to me, yeah.
And I looked at him like, "You didn't think the ribs move at all." That kind of is an MSK thing. Like, what do the intercostals do? There's muscles between them, but it's like it's such a niche down thing in these different disciplines where like I think it is structured well, but then when you get into placement, it just goes back to like turn on your neurobrain when like the placement should teach you of like which principles you're good at and which principles you're not good at.
Mm. Yeah.
It's not just like especially like the neuro principles are the most important in my mind.
Mm. Yeah, I
Like
understand that.
what is pain? Is it musculoskeletal? No. Your muscles don't tell you you have pain. Pain exists exclusively in your head, which sounds bad, but you know what I mean,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we could do a whole podcast on pain.
It is a neurological thing, right? And then people say, "Oh, like pain is complicated. You can never know." And I was like, "No, like things do happen for a reason. Always. There's always a reason. There's no like the word idiopathic is the dumbest word on the earth. It's like, oh, of unknown origin. It's like, no, no, no. It's there's an origin. You were just too dumb to figure it out. Nothing is idiopathic ever. Everything has a reason. The body's way smarter than us
Hmm.
by a mile. Like if it's feeling something, if it's bringing your pulse up, right? Just a bright ass light here. My pulse is probably high. It's 63, not bad. Um, but like it knows the body's smart. Nothing is idiopathic ever. If you get an idiopathic diagnosis, go to someone who can figure it out.
Mm.
We get taught that, like, oh, like this is just this. It's like, nah, probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think with that it's physios are very quick to diagnose based off that. And like it's much like you said at the start, it's like you have your certain tests that you do, your test confirm your diagnosis confirms your treatment, and then you get sent off. And it is that kind of that conveyor belt, I think. And it's one of those things, it's like you have to also look at like the economical factors of like healthcare as well to be like, okay, well, how can we do what you and I do, but like in a mass scale? And it's very, very hard to teach and implement that. At least that's what I think. I might be wrong.
It it's hard to implement that when you have a government institution that has to a curriculum that has to be based on research.
Absolutely.
Like what we do is extremely based on research, but the research isn't like see this, do this. It's like, okay, this paper says this joint has this much range of motion, and this paper says that this lung expands this much and has this much compliance, and this is how they interact because this paper says it. And then like we bring all that together to help someone. And I think it will never be like that unless it's a private institution in which the curriculum can just be like not governed by like some sort of governing physio body.
Yeah. It's that it comes back to the autonomy, doesn't it? It's like but it's structured autonomy essentially. It's not just doing whatever you feel like, but it's like here is the system, here is the model, and it takes all these principles into account.
Yeah, and it's hard though to make a case to like, hey, come to my school. You're gonna learn how to help people, but my curriculum is not based on research, but it is at the same time. And you're gonna be very, very confused when you talk to your other physio friends because you're gonna be learning way different things than them.
Hmm.
Like you're gonna be taught opposite things to them.
It's not
So
a
it's
good
like,
marketing strategy.
yeah. Well, it's like the same with when you said like diagnosis dictates treatment. Like, no, no, no. Treatment confirms diagnosis.
Mhm.
Because if the treatment doesn't work, the diagnosis is wrong.
Absolutely.
So it's like you don't the di I don't that's why I don't give anyone a diagnosis because it's like
Mm.
I don't know until it gets better. Then maybe. Like, unless I have an ultrasound machine, which sidebar, I want to buy a portable ultrasound. It's gonna be super sick. Super unnecessary, but it like connects to your iPad. Um,
Shit,
yeah,
that
it's
sounds
very
cool.
expensive. Very, very expensive.
How much?
Um, like 10 grand US, 50,
Oh,
20 grand US.
fucking hell.
Uh, but when you have a child, then when your wife is sad, you can just give her the ultrasound machine. She can look at her child on the couch.
Worth every penny.
How sick is that? I paid $20,000 for that. Maybe not 20, but we'll see. It's just that well, I don't buy anything else. I sit in a room all day long and walk to
Mhm.
the gym in Thailand and eat the same food and buy nothing nice. So I can buy myself a portable ultrasound machine. That would also
That's
be
a
super to look at like tendon healing. Like imagine someone came in,
mm,
like each day I could look at your tendon integrity.
mm,
That would be wild. Like that's physio to the next level, what I want to do. It's like, is this helping your tendon heal? No, your tendon's not healing as fast as I want it to heal. Okay, nutritional intervention, go.
mhm.
And then like we see, and like we can visibly see if we're changing. Because right now it's like this tendon is this grade, it takes this amount of time to heal. But it's like, okay, no, like it could take faster. Like every single person who comes to me, I ask about nutrition, they're like, huh, this is interesting. I was like, what's your training split? They're like, oh, this is not physio. I was like, yeah, no, I'm treating a human. I'm not treating an injury.
It's interesting you say that because like my next kind of discussion was going to be like, do you find that the coaching aspect of like even before you were a physio like has made you a better physio? Because the things that I found difficult when I did MSK was this is obviously within the NHS and obviously people have been on a wait list for 9 months. So they've had this issue for 9 months without intervention. You get a very quick diagnosis, intervention, and there's like, cool, just do these one or two things. I'll see you in 4 weeks. When it's like, if I had that individual as a client for those 4 weeks, weekly check-ins, like consistent communication. Obviously, this is paid versus public. Like the level of results you can get from a coaching perspective versus the here is your treatment or intervention is just I find it's night and day difference. I'm sure you've probably found the same.
Yeah, and that's why like my consults, they're not consults. They're just like, so you get a call, you pay a fee, you get a call, you get a plan, and you get 2 weeks of communication with me to send me videos. We chat through the plan, you get better and better, and then you go out on your own.
Yeah, I do
And
the same
people
thing.
are
I
like,
do
oh,
exactly the same.
it's like, oh, why is it so expensive? I was like, is it expensive? So you go to another physio and just see them for 12 sessions for half hour each and have nothing, do nothing in between, and then just be in the same place. But because it's one session, one payment,
Mm,
people are like, oh, it's expensive. I was like, no, no, this is the cost of results.
mm.
And then like some people, when they get help, they'll get upset and they're like, I spent $7,000 on Cairo for 7 years. But obviously not the other practitioner's fault. But yeah, like the coaching aspect is like you're dealing with a human, right? So you can tell very, very quickly when you're talking to someone, like, do I need to talk softly? Do I need to come in hot with this person? It's like, do I need to tell them do I need to tell them what they want to hear, or do I need to tell them what they need to hear? Probably need to do both, but like, how do you tell them? It's like, hey, it's been 8 weeks. You've seen me twice. We've had no changes.
Mhm.
Something needs to change between our next session. If it doesn't, don't book, don't come back. You have the tools, we need to use them. Either the plan is the problem or the execution is the problem. If the plan is the problem, we are a team. Let's figure out a better
Let's fix
plan.
that. Yeah.
If the execution is a problem, how do we make the execution not a problem?
Mhm.
That is so simple. All right. You're
Mhm.
dealing with a human, you're a team. If my I want all of my clients to get results.
Mhm.
If they don't, I fail and they fail.
Mhm.
Right. It's not like, oh, you paid me money, so like now whatever. It's like, no, I want to be the fucking guy that everyone goes to because he's the man and can actually help people. And if I don't get results, I don't get that reputation. So I take it very personally when someone doesn't get results. Like, so that's kind of like the coaching attitude. When you can, so like there's the army thing. So like the army works so well because a man will never let another man down. I say man, I mean like human,
Yeah.
right? As soon as you're a team, like everyone in the world, they'll let themselves down all the time. They'll eat like shit, they'll trash their body. But as soon as like they have someone else of importance that they feel like they could let down, they will dial in, right? It's like you smoke. You're a female, you smoke. You get pregnant. Do you keep smoking? No, because you're not, don't want to let your kid down because it's not even born yet, right? So as soon as you can make the connection with your client slash patient that like, if you fail, client, it's not you, it's we fail.
Mhm.
And as soon as that happens, like that's what is missing from physio, in my opinion. The biggest thing of like human psychology and coaching, because everyone can have the perfect plan. Welcome to Instagram. Everyone just argues about the perfect plan. I was on a call this morning with a client, and he was like, "Yeah, like I think my clients just don't do what I say." He's like, "I'm very confused about nutrition." I was like, "Are you, or are you just like, if I did everything, would you know what to do?" He's like, "Yeah."
Mm.
I was like, "Okay, well, let's figure out ways to get your clients to go closer to where they want to be instead of like, you know what to do, right? In theory, everyone knows what to do in theory, but like you need to get a human to do things, a human to
Mhm.
change. That's very hard. That's the hardest. So like creating the
Yeah.
buy-in is where coaching side comes in.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the from what I've seen, a lot of younger coaches are kind of realizing because it's a bit of a um not an well, like a bit of a stigma about like coaching moment where it's like you get clients, you give them plans, you live in Dubai, and that's it. Whereas like actually you have to spend a lot of time, especially if you want to go down that like behavior change route as well, you have to spend a lot of time talking with your client, and like one check in a week does not cut it for most people who need to go through that change. Your robots and your bodybuilders who are just like, oh, I just need a plan. I'm highly motivated. I'll hit my food exactly as you say because I have the buy-in. Great, but like the ones who like, they need that kind of either emotional support or that nutritional support or again that rehab support. That is where like the actual coach word comes into it. And I've said this 100 times again in my workshop. Is like you actually have to spend time assessing your clients, talking to them. You can't just be like, oh, I know what works. I'm going to give you what I know works. Go do it.
Yeah. Like it takes quite a commitment to do that. And I think that's why
Mm-hmm.
like so I worked at a commercial gym. So if you live in the UK, it's like a basically pure gym.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in Canada, I worked at Fitness World. It's
Mm-hmm.
like Good Life. Um, and they basically like client buys PT sessions and you give them everything at once. They get overwhelmed as fuck and they don't get results. It's like they went from doing nothing to having to do everything. It's like that's craziness. So I think that's where it's like you need to meet the client where they're at because they're never going to do it. Like I have a client that had 30 workouts in a year. Yeah, a year like there's 365 days and he worked out 30 times.
Yeah.
Now he works out 5 days a week. We've been together
Mm-hmm.
for like 2.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like he wasn't ready to get there. But we made slow progress, and now he shout out this guy, he actually goes to physio school in the UK,
Oh, that's pretty fucking sick.
and he's from Canada because I went to physio school in the UK. I was like, right, it's like let's go, right? But any like a lot of people would be like, oh, like what's like you're just not doing it. You
Mhm,
just need to like care more. It's like no, like some people aren't ready,
mhm,
and a coach can only you can kind of like facilitate someone into caring more, but you need to be like ready. Like
mhm,
I had a consult with this lady, and after the consult, she was a very standoffish. And
mhm,
after the consult, I was like, hey, like you were standoffish the entire time. I don't know if you're going to be bought into anything I'm going to say. I
mhm,
don't know if you're going to trust me. Please take a month to think about this if you
mhm,
want coaching, because it's not going to work if you're not ready for this. I
mhm.
didn't, maybe I said something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like she was like a high powered businesswoman who like travels around the United States, has a lot of money,
Mhm,
and she was basically like the playing the I'm different than everyone card. And it's like, no, you're not different than everyone. Like you're still human. And then I came like she came in hot because she's like the power businesswoman. I came in hotter of like it's no, like this is what we're gonna do. And then she was very standoffish, and I was like, hey, like you need to be ready to change because
mhm.
it's not me, it's you. I didn't say it like that, but it's not. It's you.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But some
yeah.
people
And then,
they're just not ready. And it's fine. And like I've not fired clients, but I've said like, hey, I'm not putting your payment through this month. Take a month, figure it out,
mhm,
then we'll come back.
mhm,
And like they come back and they're like, okay, I'm ready now. And then they get sick results.
mhm,
But you have to be in a good financial place to do that. That's fine.
mhm. Yeah,
And
I
two,
get that.
sometimes when a client wants to like pause coaching, you have to almost like shut it down. It's like, oh, I need to take a month break. It's like, what's gonna happen when you take a month break?
Mhm,
What's gonna be? I was like, do you know how much progress you can make a month? I send them like the week one and week four, and they're like, I'm like, look at this, and now you want to just stop? You're gonna be worse than week one.
mhm,
And they're like, oh, like, that makes so much sense. So I almost like they're like, I'm stopping coaching. I'm like, no, you're not. And then after they're like, oh, I'm so glad you didn't let me stop.
mhm.
But I don't ever say anything. I just ask questions because no one can be defensive if you ask questions ever. That's the key. You have to, especially with physio, you have to make the client think that it was their idea or that they have to figure out their knowledge gap, right? So I had a girl today and she's like in my DMs and she's hesitant on the price. And she was like,
Mhm,
I would have thought that a pelvic floor physio could help me with my pelvic floor.
mhm.
And I was like, did it work with your other physio or do you still have symptoms?
Yeah,
She's like, I
yeah.
still have symptoms. I was like, do your pelvic floor physio lift weights? She's like, no. I was like, do you lift heavy weights? She's like, yes.
There's a
She's like,
disparity.
oh, I think I'll book. I was like, oh no, I was like, if it worked with her, then great. If it didn't, I am
Mhm.
here. This is the link.
Yeah.
That is all. And yeah, like it's again, human psychology. If someone identifies their own knowledge gap, they're very, very much so willing to fill it.
Mhm,
You come in trying to fill knowledge gaps. This is like what people do on Instagram. They just yell things at the internet
mhm.
when people aren't ready to hear it. It's basically like if you're going to create reels, which shout out, not me, I suck at it. I just suck at doing it. I'm good at doing it. I just suck at actually sitting down in front of the camera. Instead of being like, this is the best tricep exercise, you say like, do you have small triceps? And then they're like, oh, I do have small triceps. It's like, this could be why. I every press works your triceps, so you actually need less volume than you do biceps. or this, and they're like, oh wow, that makes sense. But if I say like, this is why your triceps aren't growing, it's like you don't say that, mine are growing. Like they get defensive right away. If we ask a question, no one's ever defensive.
That's
'Cause it's
marketing 101 from Baxter there.
like you're speaking to them, right? It's like, have you been to the physio and it works for a little bit, but then your pain always comes back? This is the problem. You still lift like shit. I'm gonna cut that up, make it real.
Oh, definitely.
What that those two sentences,
That's
those two
that's the
sentences.
entire takeaway. That's the entire takeaway
Have,
of the entire
have
conversation.
you,
Yeah.
have you been to physio and it doesn't work and your pain comes back? You still lift like shit. That's it. Literally it.
No,
This is this
I think I think all that's like that's absolutely spot on. Like, and it's probably a very good way to kind of round out the concept of like how physio should be more about coaching than it is just about the diagnosis and like the pathology or whatever you want to call it. Um, and I think I'll always circle back to I think personal training or coaching, it's very misunderstood as a profession. I don't know if you find that it's like you have to do so much more than you think from that surface level.
I think if you've
Uh,
done training in person, you know. I think a lot of
absolutely.
like there was people in my program who couldn't hold a conversation with someone.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's the first thing you have to do.
Literally.
Just talk to a human. Hey, blank, say their name back to them, look them in the eye. How are you doing today? How are
Hmm.
you feeling? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, I saw your kid was here. Like it's so simple.
Hmm.
That's the start. But if you work in person first, you have to do that.
I guess drilled into you. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh, hey, my life's going to shit. Doesn't matter. Everything has to turn off because this person has my attention for the hour.
Hmm.
And I think it gets blurry now that like we just have less conversations with someone.
I do think and this is again circling back to physio, I do think like in-person conversation is like the quality of that is getting so much worse because we live in such an online world. And like
Yeah.
I've met a
Yeah.
lot of online coaches who their entire business is online. And like you can portray yourself as you want on social media. You can portray your interests in whatever way you want. And then you meet them in person, like you are boring as fuck. Or like there's nothing from like a back and forth conversation that I can have with you. And like it really shows in person. Social media, you can hide it a bit, which I'm sure you've probably seen, but like you can fucking tell pretty quick.
I think if you do social media, you don't want to hide it.
Mm,
Like there's especially if you're like just an online coach. Do you know
mm,
who can get people strong and big and lose fat? Every single person. But they're not choosing that. They're choosing you for a reason,
mm.
not just to get them to their goal. Because there's unlimited people who can get them to their goal, right? Like Mads has clients who like she went through addiction stuff,
Mm.
and clients like, oh, I started following you because you like talked about your addiction stuff, and then like I saw you coached a lot, and like you get sick results, and then like they'll sign up with her. But it has nothing to do with her result. It has everything to do with that she is her, right? So like, the more you can just share, not the more you can share about yourself, the more buy-in you're going to get from people because they get invested. And
Yeah,
I
no,
think
absolutely. Absolutely.
that's the thing that is missing, especially like you said it yourself, like we live in the online world, no one ever has a conversation.
Hmm.
When we need to have conversations, we can't. Do you see how like we didn't really interrupt each other? We didn't talk over each
No,
other
no.
because we understand like this is when I talk, this is when you talk. It's like it's straightforward, but it's not at the same time if you never do it. I think that's one
It's
thing that is missed in physio, especially with this online world. Like you're gonna have to talk to a human in person.
mm,
So you better practice. It's like go out for dinner with someone, put your phone away. Go for coffee, put your phone away, talk to them, make eye contact. Like I run an online business, and it's funny because when I have a consult with someone, they send me everything before.
mm.
I don't I don't need to have the call 99% of the time. I could just send them the plan. We could one, I have the call so that I can get a judge of who they are. And two, I have a call because I sit in this office and talk to no one. And it's cool to learn about another human sometimes.
Mhm.
That's literally it. But it's so valuable because no one ever talks to each other.
Yeah, I think especially with our profession, it's very, very easy to become comfortable with the online aspects of this. Like, and like the example you gave about the doing the calls for consults, like, is the exact same thing. We had a consult yesterday where like we jumped on a call, and I was like, I have all your subjective history. I just want to get an idea of exactly what is you really, really need for this next 4 weeks with this consultation, with this program, so that there is no stone unturned. And it even comes to like what I do love about online coaches, you can run your business however the fuck you want. Like there's no rules. So like for onboardings now, I have calls with people because I'm like, I hate sitting on Loom or OBS and just talking through the plan. I would rather be like, right, I'm gonna call you. We're gonna go through this in 15 minutes. And any questions you're gonna have right then there, and then we're gonna answer them. As opposed to, oh, here's the recording that I send at 9 o'clock at night because that's when I work, and they watch it 11 a.m. the next day, and then they've got questions 24 hours later. They're like, cool, we wasted 2 days. We could have booked a call in on the Sunday night or wherever it is, and you could have been starting Monday.
Yeah.
And I think there's a hesitancy for coaches to have those types of, not even have those types, just have those conversations and be like, right, let's actually learn what the client wants. Like they'll have like the discovery call, the coaching consult for like 15 minutes and be like, right, cool. I'll give them more or less the same plan as everybody else, maybe 3 days instead of four, whatever it is. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that in-person conversation is just it's lacking so much. But I also think that's why doing a physio degree, or not physio degree, doing most degrees where you have to interact with people does really help.
Yeah. I think because we're getting more and more into the place where you don't have to interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if you live in like in the UK, it's bad. In Canada, like everyone just talks to each other because we're super nice. So like in Canada, if I don't hold the door for someone, they're kind of like giving me a funny look. In the UK, if I hold the door for someone, they're giving me a funny look. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
are you doing?
You
I'm
can't
like,
win.
I don't know. Trying to be a nice guy, man. So no one talks to strangers. In Canada, everyone talks to each other. I'll be in line at Tim Hortons, Starbucks, but Tim Hortons because we're in Canada. Um,
Yeah, we have Tim Hortons
and
here.
yeah, Tim Hortons is a Canadian thing. It's not the same as in Canada. Canada's the
All
best.
right, okay. All right, okay.
Uh, but yeah, like you'll be in line and you'll just like start talking to a random human. And then like sometimes you just like if you're gonna have a coffee, you just sit down with the random human, like random person that you met in the line. Or like you talk to them for the whole line, it's a long line, and then they're like, "Oh, I'll buy your coffee. Don't get me wrong. Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about it." And it's like that would never happen in the UK. Like it was super weird. Everyone was so standoffish. Everyone's giving me dirty looks, and it's like no wonder people don't know how to communicate. No wonder the reading level of the UK is that of a 9-year-old because no one just uses English or talks to each other ever.
You must have felt
Wow.
so out of place in London. You must have felt so fucking out of place in London with that.
At the start, I hated it, and now like when I go back, I'm like, oh, this is cool. But
Mm.
like when I was there, I was like quite salty about physio school. It was COVID. I was away from Mads.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of like, I wanted to fight me in the gym. Like, I just want to hang out. Like, I just want to work out and do my thing. And everyone is just like, just be a nice person. It's not that hard. Like, people litter and like just don't. I don't know. It's weird. It's almost like the UK took over the world and they're like, oh, we can just stop giving fucks now. That's kind of how I get from London. But then I like went up north and like met all the cool Manchester people and like hung out with Cuba and like met all these cool
Mm.
people who I wasn't forced to hang out with. And I'm like, oh wow, the UK is like pretty sweet. Now like I like when I go back there because I like the first time we hung out on my
Mhm.
story I put I'm working out tomorrow at FLF. Anyone who wants to come, hit me up. And you're like, yo, I'll be there. And then now we're on this podcast. Like that's
Now
so
this is
cool.
happening. Yeah. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Never that would never happen in anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
forget that. Like some of the like the longer term clients I've got who are into the same thing as me is like I think I've got them from just following them and they complained about like a shoulder pain. And I was like, oh hey, just do this. And they're like, holy shit, that worked instantly. And now they're clients. It's not an outreach, it's not sales, it's literally just oh, I can help with you. I can help you with this. Sorry. Do you want to just try this out? And it's like, fuck, that works. Please give me more. I will pay you. And like that's your marketing. That is literally a marketing strategy as a not even as a physio, just as a coach in general. It's just I can show you that I can help you.
Yeah. Like there's been times where I'm like, I follow someone, so they follow me and I follow them back. And they're just like doing things that I'm like, I could help you so much, but I don't want to slide in your DMs. So I'm like,
Yeah.
every piece of content I'll create is literally, you are literally the case study.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
like, 2 weeks later, they're like, yeah, I think I want you as my coach. Like all the stuff you say makes so much sense. And I was like, good, because you were my target of all of my content to fix all
Yeah.
of the things that wrong with you and get you the best results. And now you're going to pay me for it. Sweet. I was going to do it for free. I was already doing it for free. So like that's usually, but that's like I don't really create content. It's just like if I see something, I'll be like, ah, that's probably not the best.
Yeah.
Probably do this. I'll just,
Let me
but
solve
I'll
that
never.
problem. Mm.
I think the problem is like I can be right without someone else being wrong,
Yeah, that's a very
right?
good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah. I think that's a interesting way to bring that full circle. Because like
But
as you
like
said right at the start, yeah.
if I wanted someone to be wrong, I would do the face over the real thing, and it's like you can be right without showing that someone else is wrong. It
Hmm.
just makes it look worse. It's
I
like just
completely agree with that.
put out all the right stuff, and if people want to follow it, that's fine. But you don't have to bring someone else down to help other people because maybe you're trying to help the person that you're bringing down. But as soon as you put your face over their shit, it's like now they just hate you and you look like an
Hmm.
idiot. Now you're
Hmm.
not actually not going to help them when they actually the post was about them to help them. So it's like I don't know the face over the reaction over the reaction is just
I
absolutely
hate those. I hate
why.
those.
It's like it's not. I don't. I wouldn't say I hate it. Like I understand. Like
Mm,
I could get 1 million followers very easy. Go to Squat
mhm,
University's page and go to all the physio pages, and I would just shit all over them and say how much they suck.
mhm,
Right. So, but some people say good things, and some people say like they say half good things, half bad things. So to take all the
mhm,
bad things and be like, hey, this isn't how it works. This is actually how it works. And then I'd have people like making posts about my thing, but no one would know who's really right. And I
mhm.
don't want to be that. Right. I'd rather
Yeah.
be like, okay, this is do this. And like I have a client who was like, I study your Instagram. He's like, I go back to all your posts and write down things, and then I use them with my clients and they work. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, that's sick. I'm like,
That's what
okay,
it's for.
sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I want. I want someone to be like, oh, I used your post and then got results. Like I don't need to tell everyone else I don't need to be bad. I don't need to tell everyone else they suck
Mhm.
in order for me to help people. So
I think
that's I
that's
think
a
the biggest
I think
thing.
that's a nice way to round that off. That's actually spot on for me.
Just because you're right doesn't mean you have to someone else has to be wrong.
I rate it.
Good chat.
Sick.